Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this afternoon about creating shared value before we move on to the panel discussion, which will be run by Adma Bar in place of me. We're seeing a massive increase in experiential travel. It's been coming over the last 10, 15 years, foreseen by Joss Krippendorf in The Holidaymakers. People are seeking memorable experiences and they're looking for an engagement with the local community, with the environment. And of course, these memories, these quality and depth co-creative memories are a shared product of hosts and guests. And I'm reminded of what Justin Francis said in the classroom in Greenwich many years ago now, that whilst you may not be able to taste the difference between fairly traded coffee and other kinds of coffee with a responsible tourism experience, it should feel different. And Justin says that people come back to responsibletravel.com looking for those kinds of experiences again, having once experienced them. So why should you take responsibility? Well, you've heard me talk about this many times, but the point I'd like to make is partly it's because it's the right thing to do for this and future generations, but also because it's good for staff morale, it's good for product quality, there are cost savings, there's reduced risk. There's a whole series of reasons why it makes sense, not just the marketing reasons, which is where people have tended to focus. So in taking responsibility, you have to focus. The agenda is broad, nobody can deal with all of it. I suggest you look for what the issues are locally where you operate, talk with local communities, then explain to your customers, your suppliers and other businesses why you've chosen to take responsibility, and then set goals and measure and report the impact. If you do that, you can get the credit and you're sure to be safe from the regulators who are dealing with mis-selling. Now, much of this work on creating shared value actually draws on Porter's work. Now, Porter is famous for cluster theory, and in a way, a destination is a cluster of businesses and experiences in a place which is experienced by the tourist. Now, the traditional approach, which is still much favoured by national governments, is with a primary focus on foreign exchange earnings, looking for volumes, and essentially CSR1, really donating money to the local communities is where we are. What Porter is promoting is a much more bottom-up approach, drawing on the local community, creating local economic benefit, creating supplementary and alternative livelihoods, and integrated rural development. And that's really CSR2. And that's where the responsible tourism movement is in terms of the broad spectrum of business approaches to sustainability. Kramer and Porter talk about reconceiving their products and markets. These are in significant journal articles in the Harvard Business Review, redefining productivity in the value chain to improve quality, reduce costs, and increase the reliability of supply, while stewarding essential natural resources. And in this way, you can create a cluster of local businesses around your hotel or around your tour operator to enable you to compete and thrive in the international marketplace, creating competitive market advantage, which is surely what all businesses and destinations seek in an increasingly competitive tourism market. So in creating shared value, we're talking about creating value for both the hosts and guests, for the guest experience, for the host community in terms of revenues, and also perhaps in the regeneration of some of their cultural heritage. And that's creating value both for the businesses and the destinations. Now, the value is obviously economic, but I would argue it is also social and environmental. And I want to make the very important point that shared value and the sharing economy are not the same thing. The sharing economy is generally very extractive and inflationary, pushing up the price of rent for people looking for somewhere to live, pushing up house values to the disadvantage often of the local community, and it's generally very extractive with the money being placed into bank accounts which are not in the destination. So really, shared value, when we talk about it in the responsible tourism movement, is much more about local economic development. And that draws on the original work that I did with DFID way back in 1998. That language now looks really out of date, doesn't it? Sustainable tourism and poverty elimination. We don't talk about that anymore. That led on to some work with Adam Abbar, who will be speaking after this, in a project in the Gambia, which Martin Brackenbury was also part of, and he's here too today. And that was about harnessing tourism for poverty elimination, funded by a Department for International Development Tourism Challenge Fund initiative. Much of my learning with Adama came from that project in the Gambia 20 or more years ago now. We've written it up. You can find the paper. It was primarily about improving access for the informal sector to tourism in the Gambia, which was designed to improve both the guest experience and the local economic development value for the local community. Adama went on to develop from that GIG, which was the Gambia is Good project, improving lives for farmers. And that was really about reducing imports, but also, very importantly, generating revenues for people who previously been subsistence farmers. Very successful project, picked up and adapted and evolved by Rupesh Kumar, and we'll see that again shortly in Kerala in India. Now to turn to Africa again, Ngwenya Glass, award winner in 2023, an award-winning destination in Eswatini, previously known as Swaziland, a very important coach stop. What they did at Ngwenya Glass was to encourage other craft workers to come in, and they've created a whole campus now. That gives them extended length of stay, but also creates opportunities for other craft workers and other food producers to make sales into the tourism industry that they might not otherwise have been able to make. And that's just one example of the way in which a successful business can involve others and benefit them without doing any damage to themselves, and indeed arguably improving their revenue opportunities too. Glyn O'Leary has been one of the pioneers of this kind of work. We'll look at some of his work with Transfrontier Parks Destination shortly. But I wanted here to look at the work they've done with Pigs Peak since they took over the management of that hotel on behalf of central government in Eswatini. Sifo Shongoi there is at the local cultural festival. It's run for the first time this year, talking with Glyn O'Leary. Sifo is the mayor of Pigs Peak, and I had the pleasure of working with him last year when I was in Eswatini talking about the creation of shared value. TFPD has a long history of partnering with communities to commercialise their tourism assets. This is their experience up at Klaus Lodge in the Kalahari. Again, by creating really high value opportunities for local guides to work with tourists and to generate revenues from guiding and from craft in that particular case. This is at Fitz's Hook, where they took the decision to encourage a local business to create the furniture for the lodge when they refurbished it. See there the value which was created by their decision to use locally produced craft to refurbish the rooms. Don't expect you to be able to read this, but this is simply the way in which we adapted their bookkeeping system so that they could easily report on the amount of money being spent locally on local procurement and in reinvesting in the product. And you can see obviously there are periods of refurbishment or initial investment where the local spend is much greater, but over time this accrues to the community. And of course that asset is only managed for them by TFPD. The lodge itself belongs to the community.
We had a discussion with the town council of this town of Pigs Peak, our nearest local town, and entered into an MOU with them to assist the town to become seen as a responsible tourism town by not only the residents, but also tourists. And one of the prime objectives in doing that was to improve the environment in which people live, but also to make it a more attractive destination for tourists. Now, in the past, the area has been very much the equivalent of a McDonald's type drive-through, where people traveling from South Africa in KwaZulu-Natal and wanting to travel on to South Africa and the Kruger National Park have simply driven through Eswatini and spent one night here in the area of Pikes Peak, and then vanished off on the next leg of their journey, but without spending any time or spending any money really in this environment. So that's been our challenge, and we engaged with the town council, and in doing that, we identified certain attractions that would make it viable for us to build on activities and to engage the town council in working with us on that. And it's turned out to be a very successful relationship. We have enjoyed great support from the members of the town council who have realized the importance of the message that we've been discussing with them, and have, as a consequence, really bought into the whole notion. And one of the outcomes, apart from the economic value that it generates, is that this past Saturday, we co-hosted with the town council an event called Temasiko Culture Event, which was actually a display of cultural activity by people from the local communities. And the feedback was fantastic. I mean, even in the songs that the dancers were singing, they were saying how this event has changed Pikes Peak forever.
Turning now to Asia, this is the Borneo Empurau Farm and Resort. This is the way you might expect to see it marketed traditionally as perhaps a high-end ecotourism resort. And to some extent, it can be marketed that way. But I'm interested in it for an entirely different reason. And it's because of the focus it has on all-inclusives and what that means for the local community in Sarawak, because it's made these kinds of experiences accessible to people who would not be able to afford the high-end resort experience, which European travellers and local Asian wealthy travellers are able to enjoy. And this collection of photographs really shows what is special to my mind about this particular resort, and it's perhaps best exemplified by the T-shirts which are worn by all the members of staff, saying that now everyone can eat empurau. This is really about the democratization of the tourism experience. Now, somebody who booked this from the West, expecting to get a traditional ecotourism experience, I think would be genuinely horrified by what they found when they got there. But look at the water park designed to attract the kids. Look at the range of accommodation, from a modern house, classic bedrooms, a longhouse, which is a tradition of Sarawak, large, essentially dormitory style accommodation. Look at the scale of the dining room and what's on offer there. A traditional glitzy Western dining room. You can see the empurau fish there in the fish tank in the restaurant. And the real giveaways, look at the family package and the competitive pricing of that. Really a product designed to make tourism acceptable to those who might otherwise not be able to have access to any kind of tourism experience, particularly a residential experience of the sort which is often offered by Borneo Empurau Farm and Resort, a really worthy winner of one of the Responsible Tourism Awards. One of the big focuses of the new course on creating shared value will be on all the mechanisms that have been used and can be used to generate local economic value. And one of the best examples of that really is often found in all-inclusives. We'll see that when we write up Fox's Safaris as a case study as well, which is a high-end safari operator in Southern Africa, and Jane will be on the panel shortly. But that's an all-inclusive, and so is this. And really we need to get away from the snobbish views of all-inclusives which predominate amongst academics and in some parts of the industry.
And Pulau is is a type of fish which usually only the affluent can consume. But as the slogan of this particular farm in Sarawak, everyone can eat empulau. And that really means that this is a farm for everyone. Empulau Farm and Resort promotes responsible tourism through a range of impactful initiatives. They are committed to community engagement involving all sort of activities related to ecotourism and environment. At the same time, whatever they do, they want to make sure the local communities are benefited. So this is a place where it includes various aspects of responsible tourism for the people and planet.
Turning now back to India with Village Ways, it's a shame that Manisha and Richard can't be with us. They're currently in India promoting Village Ways on a press trip with the Guardian newspaper. Richard Hearn was a long-term tour operator in the UK. He's now retired. Developed a company called In Travel, which basically did walking tours going from inn to inn across Europe. He had an experience walking in the foothills of the Himalayas and met with Manisha Pandey and her husband, and they decided to try to halt rural out-migration in these villages by encouraging tourism development in the villages up in the foothills of the Himalaya. It's been incredibly successful. Guests are given the opportunity to stay in the heart of the villages in community-owned guest houses, and they're guided by the local community. They have cultural experiences in the villages, but arguably more important, they have the opportunity to walk through the landscape with local guides. And of course, in doing that, they meet people along the way, get into conversations about local life, about the crops, about the wildlife, about the whole experience of living in a rural area in this part of India. And some tourists actually rebook and go back to work in the fields and help with the harvest. It's a really genuinely close encounter, a meaningful connection between the guests and the local villagers in the communities, and it is halting rural degeneration or rural out-migration and encouraging the development of thriving villages in a part of the world that would otherwise become devoid of people. The most amazing destination perhaps at the moment, if you look at the state level, is Kerala. That's because of the work of Rupesh Kumar, who runs the mission for responsible tourism across the state. It started in 2008 with a conference. I was invited to bring one of our international conferences on responsible tourism in destinations to India for the first time. We held it in Kerala in 2008. The issues that came up were already over-tourism, litter in the backwaters, and the exclusion of local communities. Lots of ideas were presented at that conference, and as a result, there were 4 experiments. The most successful was the one run by Rupesh Kumar in Kumarakom in the backwaters, and he picked up on 2 ideas, essentially from Africa. He picked up on the producer cooperatives concept from Adamabar, and from South Africa, the concept of the township tours. And what that led on to was the creation of village life experiences, where the absolute essential characteristic is that you avoid dependency on tourism by creating additional livelihoods for families and for households. And the competitive advantage is the social value proposition. So I've had many great experiences of visiting with Rupesh or a different guide, different villages, having an experience where you know that the household you're visiting in the village is being paid for your visit, so you don't have to buy, but the sheer pleasure of buying a piece of coir rope that you've made with the women in their coir rope making home working environment, or from the craft person who's made a wonderful model boat of a backwater houseboat. Buying that from the producer rather than from the hotel shop is a part of the experience, and making it yourself when you're enabled to do that enhances the guest experience massively. So that is now run out across the whole state as the official state policy on for tourism, and it's been incredibly successful in making responsible tourism in Kerala a big success. So to come to the end of this, the ICRT Global has created a network now which enables the sharing of best practices. What is very important is the development of the new course, which I'm about to start writing on creating shared value, which deals with local economic benefit. There are two more to come after that, one on destination management and one on making change. But the other thing I just wanted to point to the importance of as I come to the end of this is the importance of creating best practices, case studies, because the academics write them up as theoretical journal articles, and there's a place for that perhaps. Undoubtedly their promotion depends upon it. But what we really need are case studies which enable people to look at what's been done somewhere else in the world and look at how they might adapt it to use in their own country. I want to see a big push on this moving forward now with the responsible tourism movement through the ICRT Global. And I think a big part of that will be played through the Journal of Responsible Tourism Management, which is run from Southeast Asia by Hiram Ting, who is one of our advisory panel. And I'm looking forward to working closely with Hiram on generating more case studies to go into that journal, and also we'll be publishing them in our own teaching material and of course online on our website. I hope very much that you enjoy the panel with Adam Abbar shortly, and again my apologies for not being able to be with you today. I hope the rest of the day goes well. Thanks for listening.